am continuing on with my warm weather theme with a beach scene. Hi, I'm Lisa, the artist behind Lachri Fine Art. For today's painting, I am working in acrylics. The supplies that I'm using are listed below in the video description. If you are supporters over on Patreon, the real-time version of this tutorial is available for you guys now, so make sure to head over and check that out. Now let's move on to this tutorial. So starting off, I'm using titanium white and Mars black. I've got a base layer of gray, and I'm going to add darker black on top of that. Blending that out with a mop brush, I am using water to thin out my paints as needed. You don't want to use too much because it'll make it runny, which is definitely not what you want. Now I let that dry, and I'm going right on top of that again, now that I'm no longer fighting the white of the canvas. Now for this second layer, I'm doing the same thing I did on the first, only I'm no longer really fighting the white of the canvas like I originally was. So it makes it easier for me to get my deep colors and have them come out the values that I want them. Let that dry, and I'm going to do it again. Great thing about acrylics, it dries very quickly. You do want to make sure you let your canvas cool down all the way before you put your next layer, otherwise it'll make them dry too quickly. You can see I keep misting water. I can keep that wet as long as I need to. When I'm using the mop brush, I'm not trying to blend the black into the gray or into the white. I'm just softening my edges. And that mop brush has to be completely dry and completely clean in order to work, so you'll probably want a couple of them, because that paint dries too quickly for you to have time to clean your brush in between. So here I switched to a different mop brush because the other one was getting too wet. When it gets too wet, it will actually start creating brush strokes instead of getting rid of them. So now I'm going to move on to my mountains. I'm going to start off by making it fade from light gray down to very dark black. I'm going to dry that, and now I can come on top with some of my green colors. Now most of this is going to get covered with the palm tree later on, but I don't know how much of that will be covered, so it's better for me just to go ahead and paint them, make them complete, and not worry about what's going to be covered, being that this is such a quick thing to do. If this was really detailed and would take more than just a couple of minutes, then yeah, I would pay attention to where the tree was going to be so that I didn't waste time. But here, this is a really quick thing to do. I'm creating the hint of little palm trees in the background. I start by doing the tree trunk and then make the little branches sticking out on the top. I've misted it with water just to soften it so I could blur it out a bit with the mop brush because I don't want those lines too harsh, being that this is in the distance. Now this mountain here that is a little bit closer, you can see it's gotten much darker as I move forward. These palm trees are going to be a little bit more defined, a little bit bigger. And I'm pulling some of these palm trees down into the side of the mountain as well. Notice that the palm trees, the trunks are all slightly curved. I don't want them all perfectly straight or it will have a very unnatural feel. So I'm going to move on to the sand. I've mixed burnt sienna along with white and black to get this grayish tone. And I want it to be darker in the back and fade to the lighter in the front. For this turquoise color that I'm blending, this is phthalo green, phthalo blue, and white. I've added a little bit more green and some black towards the back because I just want that to fade into the background. This will help me to create a lot of depth versus having a harsh line where that back water line and sky meet. And I'm doing all of this wet into wet. This whole area I'm keeping wet while I blend the darker background color into the lighter color that I'm using up towards the sand. I'm using a Taklon bristled filbert brush. These filbert brushes are better for avoiding too many brush strokes. If you use a flat brush, you're going to have more definite lines where each brush stroke starts and stops. So these filberts are great for this. Now I have started to add some streaks in with the white, and I'm making sure that those stay mostly horizontal so my water doesn't look lopsided. I've come back through with the darker teal color and added more of these little ripples. Now for the wet sand up here, I'm starting again with the phthalo blue and phthalo green and a lot of water. I want this to be very transparent. I just want the water to look like it's wet. I don't want to completely change the color. I'm adding shadows under the main body of water and a little bit under that first row of wet sand. I let that dry, and then I made an even thinner mixture, more water, less paint of the same color I previously used, and made a second row of wet sand. Because of the way that waves move, it comes in layers, and so I've got to break that up on mine. You can see I used a lot of water on that second layer, and so I had to use the hairdryer right away to dry it after I applied it. So I'm using white now to create the just the white sea foam at the edge of the main body of water and a little bit on the first row of wet sand. I'm keeping my lines mostly horizontal. I don't want a lot of vertical lines. Onto the palm trees. I'm using the same colors I used on the sand, just a little bit more black so that it's darker. Notice for my highlights, I'm getting that slightly rounded shape with both the highlights actually and the shadows. I'll do the same. I'll come the opposite direction. This helps my tree trunk to look like it's somewhat curved. And I'm not doing little teeny details with a liner brush for that. I'm just using the brush I was already using, and I pull it in a curved motion and it creates those streaks all in its own. So now for the palm fronds, I'm starting with black. Just like any other trees that I will paint, I will almost always start with black and then add at least 2 different shades of green on top of that. I want these to look pretty fluffy, so I'm letting the brush strokes show towards the end of each of these palm fronds. I also want to point out that they're all slightly curved as well. So they're not all perfectly straight. Perfectly straight would be too stiff for this type of palm. Now I'm coming on top of this with a darker green. Now with this darker green, I'm not trying to cover all of the black. It's very important that some of that black show through. Once I get that on, I'm going to come on top. I'm going to let that dry, and I'm going to come on top with an even lighter green. While that dries, I'm adding some highlights to my tree trunks. There we go. Now I can switch to the lighter green. Now I'm using a very fluorescent green. This isn't necessarily a very natural green. I chose to use this because it goes with my own decor, and I'm keeping this painting for myself for now. So it's a little bit brighter than you would typically see. You can choose to use a slightly more muted color if you like. But I used 3 shades of green on top of the black here, and this just helps me to make it look more realistic than if I only used black and 1 shade of green. And I've switched to the liner brush for the finer details, adding a little bit of the turquoise or teal color into those leaves as well and onto the side of the tree trunk. I'm adding a little bit more black for the shadows inside or in the center of the trees, and that is it. Now for this one, I will have a line drawing available for you over on my website, so if you want to paint this but you're not sure how to get the shape of the waves, that will be available for you guys over there. That link is below in the video description. Thanks for watching. Again, if you are supporters over on Patreon, the real-time version of this tutorial is available for you guys now, complete with voiceover, so make sure to head over and check that out. If you're new to my channel, I have new video critiques every Tuesday where I'm critiquing your original paintings or drawings, my own speed paintings, drawings, and tutorials every Wednesday, art Q&A videos every Thursday, and artist vlogs every weekend. So if you haven't already, I would love for you to subscribe so you don't miss out on anything, and you can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Google+. All of those social media sites are linked below in the video description where you can keep up with news, my newest work, and see real-time clips of whatever it is I'm currently working on. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Ow. I hit my head on a wall yesterday. Now there's a bump and it hurts when I touch it. I should stop touching it.